My name is Ya Cao. Today I want to explain to you why atheism is unrealistic.
Unrealistic? Compared to what? The alternative is magical sky spirits that poof the world into existence at a sheer whim. They make sci-fi fantasy movies out of that kind of shit. Unrealistic, my well-toned and shapely hiney. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers, BionicDance here. So, you might wonder sometimes why I keep covering the same topics over and over. I've already said it all, been saying it for years, right? Guys like this are why. If I don't keep saying it, all you'll ever hear are people like him and his ilk. If I say what needs saying once and then stop, who'll counter their bullshit? Besides, I say it better than anyone else.
Many Western countries in Europe and the United States were founded in Christian belief. Just look at the cathedrals and the US dollar with the phrase, "In God we trust." Then you will know.
You'd think everybody would know this is bullshit by now. I guess they think it's such a knockout punch argument that they don't bother to do the research. "In God We Trust" was put on the money in 1956 to show the world just how much we aren't communists. Before then, the official motto of the United States was E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. That's also when "under God" was added to the Pledge of Allegiance. You'd think people would know this by now. You'd think.
However, more and more people declare that they are atheists, who believe there is no God.
And you'd think we could stop explaining this one too. If the number of gods you believe in is 0, then you're an atheist. Full stop. You do not have to declare that God does not exist. It's enough to be a non-believer. It's funny how theists so rarely leave room for a broad category of people who don't believe in God for any reason. I think it's just another case of trying to frame the argument to their own advantage, putting a thumb on the scale, so to speak.
Or agnostic, meaning they cannot know whether God exists.
I know that's a traditional definition of agnostic, but it is not only not etymologically accurate, it's also another case of not leaving a broad category. Gnosis means knowledge. Agnostic means lacking knowledge. It's enough to not have information to be agnostic. I'm an atheist because I'm agnostic. I lack sufficient knowledge to say a God exists, and so I do not believe in a deity. I'm also an apistivist, meaning I will not use faith as a method of reaching a conclusion. These kinds of definitions are important because they accurately frame people's positions instead of backing them into corners because they haven't sufficient terminology to express their actual stance.
I have had many chances to interact with atheists. They all think they have very strong reasoning that they have already found out that God does not exist.
Most atheists I know say that theists have presented insufficient evidence, often contradicted by more provable evidence, to even suggest a God exists. They don't say a God can't exist, just not the one theists have claimed exists. And they're right. But a God could exist. Maybe. Probably not. But perhaps.
However, as the conversation deepens, they cannot provide any scientific evidence about why God does not exist.
And now we get into the burden of proof shifting. It's not an atheist's job to show that a God doesn't exist. It's the theist's job to show that one does. If nobody ever claimed a God exists, the atheists would just go about their day not giving a shit. It's when believers start to not merely say that a God exists, but expecting people to change their lives around this belief, even if they don't believe, when this starts to be a problem. If you're going to impose rules and restrictions on my life because of your God, you'd better be prepared to prove that such a creature exists. Basically, I argue against religion in self-defense. I really wouldn't care otherwise.
What is funny is that many of them are disgusted about God, which they won't admit it exists. Why do they discuss something that does not even exist?
Like I said, self-defense. I argue against your excuse for being an asshole. If your God doesn't exist, you'll have to confront the fact that religion's misogyny, homophobia, and other kinds of abusive behavior are really your own idea.
They always say, "Let God show himself, then I will believe." The famous German philosopher Immanuel Kant once said these famous words. He said, "To prove the existence of God is difficult, but to prove that God does not exist is even more difficult."
So, I don't need to prove God doesn't exist. I don't need to prove you're wrong. You need to prove that you're right. Even if I can't prove that God isn't real, that does not mean we're forced to say that he is instead. If you want your claim to have any legitimacy, you're going to have to step up to the plate and justify it.
Atheism is impractical. Why? There was a private detective that was pursuing a criminal. Eventually, he heard that the guy was hiding in this 4-story building. One day he went in and looked in every room, but he did not find the criminal. Could he conclude that the guy was not there? Of course not.
But could he conclude that the guy was there? Again, of course not. But he could set up surveillance gear, have the building staked out 24/7, use heat detection goggles, and so on. At a certain point, it would be quite reasonable to conclude that the person who said the criminal was hiding in that building was full of shit.
If God exists, he must be infinite and eternal.
Depends on which God. If the Abrahamic God isn't real, but someone like, say, Thor actually is, then these conditions for God's existence go out the window.
Therefore, you must go to every corner of the universe at all time to find God.
No, you don't. If God is real, he can totally put in a guest appearance here on Earth. And if he hasn't done that, then justify your belief in him, her, it, or them. If nobody encountered God, then where did the idea of God even come from?
Many people demand the proof of God's existence, but we are finite and we live only a short time. How can anyone prove the infinite and eternal God?
That's up to you. You're the ones who say he's real. It's your job to show us that you're not crazy, lying, or taking a bad fantasy novel too seriously.
Some people don't believe God exists because they believe in evolution.
No, they don't. They might say a creationist God doesn't exist, but that's not saying that no gods exist.
They think we are the result of random chances.
You need to stop saying that. Seriously, we are not the result of random chances, and that doesn't mean that intelligent design is the only other possible choice. A ball doesn't need to be intelligently directed to where it lands after it's been thrown, but neither is it random where it ends up. The universe has regular ways it functions without someone at the controls, and evolution is not random.
If the human were the result of random chances, life would be meaningless.
He says this as if life owes him meaning. This doesn't say that a godless universe without meaning is impossible. It says that it's unacceptable.
Why? Because no matter how long you will live, say 120 years, you are still like a spark. All of a sudden disappears in the infinite time of the universe. You don't know where you come from, and you don't know where you are going to. None of your offsprings after your grandchildren will even know you or remember you. Exactly what is the meaning of your life?
Life is what you make of it. What it means is up to you. It sounds like that's not enough, but that might just be tough noogies. Can you live with that?
If God exists, you will be missing out his care and love for you.
And if he doesn't exist, it was never there to begin with, and you're just using religion as your binky, security blanket, or stuffed animal. And if it's a different God than the one you think exists, you're probably just as screwed. So let's not have any more scarcely veiled Pascal's wager here today, alright? Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think. You've got two choices. You can rate this video and share it everywhere across social media, or I can send my minions after you. Choose wisely.